Hey crafters, welcome to my Mekanism V8 Spotlight. So it was about 4 days ago when I was recording my, probably what will become my 14th or so episode of the Infinity Fortress series, when I had made a comment that I was kind of depressed that Mekanism V8 hadn't made it into our Infinity Labs mod pack, mostly because we were waiting for some of the other mods that we use to update their Mekanism API to the new one. Well, a day later, Toasty was like, well, we'll just bung it in anyway and fix things as we can and just know what crashes the server and what crashes clients and just avoid it. So we got to play around with it anyway. And so I started looking through Mekanism V8 and was kind of blown away at all the cool new stuff that was to do with it, as well as all the nice UI upgrades and neat little features that have been added. So being a person who likes to do his research, I hit Google and decided to see what was all out there and discovered that there wasn't much. There was one video done by TechnicPack and Aidancbrady, kind of as a teaser video, and that was about it. A couple of things from Aidan himself on his news feeds, but really there was nothing out there. So I spent 6 hours yesterday and taught myself everything I could about Mekanism V8 as far as all the new stuff, and now I feel pretty comfortable with it, at least comfortable enough to show it to you guys, to kind of fill this vacuum in information that there is right now. So what we'll start with is sound. Now, what happened in the latest update is now Mekanism sounds go through the native Minecraft sound chain. So unlike before when it was kind of its own little thing, which you would have to change completely in the config file, now you can just, if you want to change the sound, all their stuff is handled on the block. So if we want it really loud, you can do that. And of course I'm using the, here, I'll turn it back down. And if you want to turn it completely off. So yeah, I'm using the sawmill because that is kind of historically the most heinous sounding of all the blocks from Mekanism. So it's really nice that you can now adjust sounds inside the game. So I'll just turn that back up to about 30%. I'll actually have to turn that down later because some of the new stuff is kind of loud. You just break that and get rid of it. So that's some of the new stuff there. Other changes is there's been some, and that's a bad sign, but whatever. The universal cables have all been upgraded in their capacity. Many significantly so, about 5 times on each of them, 10 times on the ultimate universal cable. So it has been just phenomenal as far as that upgrade, because there's just so much power you can pump through these things now. It puts them kind of far above everything else that you can get your hands on, aside from the new thermodynamics cryothium cooled conduit. I think that's what it's called. So yeah, these cables are now very, very nice for power transmission. I absolutely love that change. It's nice to have some nice high-capacity cables. Another thing that's been changed is, while the ultimate control circuit has always been in the game, now there are actually uses for it. Just click on it here real quick. So it's some of the late-game stuff, which I'll be hitting later, but yeah, now there's actually uses for those things. So expect to see those a little bit later when I cover some of that stuff. And another thing that's changed, and I'll just grab this guy out because I'll be using him a lot, is that the configurator now has a lot of new settings. Before it was just wrench, rotate, and configurate. Now we've got rotate, wrench, configurate items, configurate fluids, configurate gases, and configurate energy. So they all act on different conduits and different ports of machines, and I'll be using this pretty well throughout. So you're definitely going to need one of these if you're going to be tackling Mekanism, because some of these things you pretty much need the configurator for now. So that's all cool. So what else we got? Well, next one is factory upgrades. Now these are cool. Before, whenever you wanted to do a factory upgrade, you had to pull your factory. You had to pull whatever you wanted to upgrade, like say an enrichment chamber, right up off your factory floor, and dump it on the crafting table, and then upgrade it. Now, however, we've got these nice basic factory installer cards. All you do is you equip one of those in your hand to a factory that's already on the ground, and right-click it. Boom, it's upgraded. And it does normally eat the card. I'm in creative mode. And just like the other factories, you have to upgrade them one at a time. You can't just go right to the Elite Factory. See, you got to go Advanced and then Elite. And these crafting recipes are actually rather nice because they're simply whatever you would have normally done to do the factory, and you just throw a block of wood in the center. So you don't really have to learn anything new. All you're doing is just putting a block of wood in there. So that's pretty cool. The other cool new thing with the upgrades, I'll just dump these in here and put these in my inventory. There's a couple of new things. First, the upgrade UI has changed dramatically. So now basically you've got this little bar down here that tells you supported speed and energy, so you can see those changing back there. And if you grab your upgrade, you just put it in the slot, and then it slowly drains them in and tells you what's in there. And you can select it, and if you want to dump it back out, there's a little arrow here you can see turn on blue, and that'll dump right back into your inventory. It can't do it because it's currently going, so... Oh, sorry, that's to change them. If you want to dump them, ooh, they don't want to dump today. Okay, well that apparently broke. I'm actually using one of the... That's terrible. I'm actually using one of the development builds, the build 2.567, so obviously that did work before, but now it's not working. I don't know. I guess that must have broken in the last build, so I'll have to add that to the bug reports. So this is still a very early version of version 8, so yeah, I expect stuff like that. So moving on. So we've got here a new upgrade, the gas upgrade. Increases efficiency of gas using machinery. So now you can dump these into your purification chambers or anything else that takes gas as its main operation specifically in the ore producing chain, and you can now use gas much more efficiently. Let's see if this is still broken here. Let's see, that one works. So for some reason energy upgrades in factories don't work, so I'll have to put that to Aidan's attention. So yeah, the gas upgrade, very cool now that you can do things for using less gas. Extremely, extremely nice that you can do that now. Next up, probably the thing that a lot of people have been looking forward to, the flamethrower. Here you can see the recipe for it. Pretty easy to make, actually. Surprisingly easy. It's just gas tanks, some tin, flint and steel, advanced control circuit, and some bronze. So grab that guy. I'll put those guys back in there. And basically, it's just like a jetpack. You toss it into a gas tank or a electrolyte separator that has hydrogen in it, and it'll slowly charge up. I'm not going to do too much with this, so I'll just charge them up a little bit. And then you just unleash your stream of death. They did this. They played with. Oh, they played with this a little bit in the teaser video. So I'm not going to play with it too much here because I could easily burn all this down, and I spent a little bit of time setting it all up. So we'll just dump him back right in there. Next up, the gauge dropper and chemical upgrades. These are some exciting new stuff. So you can build a gauge dropper with just an osmium and get in some glass panes. And what this guy does, and I'll pick these up while I'm at it, is that if, let's say you've got a rotary condenser that you've got some water vapor stuck in and you can't get it out of there, or you don't want to have to hook up all piping and tank and stuff to get it vented. Well, you just grab your gauge dropper out of your inventory and left click, and boom, it just pulls that all up. Now if you want to pull multiple things out, you can empty it just by holding Shift and then right clicking on the ground, and boom, it's empty. You can go back in there, pick up some more water. It holds a full bucket at a time, and get rid of it. So that's very cool. So now you can empty out your machines without having to go through lots of extra gesticulations to do that. The other cool thing is that many of the chemical makers and chemical handlers can now be upgraded with speed upgrades and energy upgrades too. So that's very nice. Usually these things were your bottlenecks in your production chain. So now that we can speed them up and make them more energy efficient, it's going to be a whole new ball game when going for tier 4 ore production. So that's all very neat. But that's all very simple stuff. You can figure it out just by using NEI. As we go this way, it starts to get a little more complicated. Next one is they ran out of room. It's the Oredictionificator. Basically what this guy is, and I'll just grab all this stuff out of here. Boom, boom, boom. Put those in there. What this guy does is it's kind of a unifier for all kinds of things in the game, especially in the modded game, where you've got a lot of overlap on Ore Dictionary, but occasionally you have things that require a very specific version of like ore or ingot or something like that. A good example is Artifice. Artifice adds a lot of new ores to the game, but while they Oredic as other things, like say you've got iron ore on basalt, while it Oredic's as iron ore, it doesn't go into the mechanism chain by itself. It has to be converted. That's what this guy does. As kind of an easy example here, what I've got is Tinker's Construct, Copper, and Bronze. What I can do is click. So you've got a bunch of things, but you want to go to New Filter, and unfortunately you need to know the actual whole Oredic name, so you can use an Ore Dictionary to do that. It's another mechanism item. Or you can also turn on Ore Dictionary in NEI, which I've got off at the time for the moment. But what you can do, and I just happen to know we've got ingot bronze and that we want to convert. So now that I've got ingot bronze in there, it pulls up everything that matches that Oredic name. In this case, I've got Oredic bronze from Tinker's, which is this guy, and I've got Oredic bronze from Mechanism. So that's the one I want to do. So hit save. Good. Do a new filter, and I also want to do ingot copper. Boom. So now I've got the copper ingot. That's the Tinker's Construct one if I press over here. Fortunately, there's no tooltips on here yet. I think that they're making a change to that. That was something that was brought up in the bug reports as a feature that could be used. But anyway, so now I've changed it to that's the Mechanism copper. So now I've got both these filters in here. And you can see it zooming out over to the right there. If I put a bronze ingot or a copper ingot, it automatically converts it over to the Mechanism version. And by using logistical transporters that have been set to pull out of this chest and pull out of the Oredictionificator, I can just put all my stacks in there, and it'll slowly process all of those through the Oredictionificator and into this other chest. So we're going in as Tinkers, and we're coming out Mechanism. That's a nice, easily utilized little thing, and it does all of your Ore Dictionary conversion basically in one block. There's still some stuff that it doesn't convert, but those are coming in patches pretty soon. I think he just added nugget conversion as one of the things it can do. I don't think block conversion is being done, but I'm not 100% sure of that. So while that does its thing, now we move on to some of the bread and butter of Mechanism version 8, and that's lasers. Lasers are kind of in a medium range of expensive. You got your reinforced alloy, steel casings, energy tablets, and a diamond. That makes one laser. So, not terrible. Also, you've got your laser amplifier, which is steel surrounding an energy tablet and a diamond. Again, not bad. Definitely kind of mid-game kind of level of stuff. And then a laser tractor beam, which I'll hit in a second, is just a laser amplifier, one of those guys, and an electric chest. So, again, these aren't terribly expensive, but you do need a lot of them as you get further into Mechanism now. So what do the lasers do? Well, at a very first blush level, what a laser does is it just blasts through stuff. You can blast through dirt, you can even blast through animals and stuff, and it'll just keep digging and breaking blocks. And that's basically what it does, and it consumes 2,000 RF per tick to do it, and it sends down a beam that'll dig through pretty much anything. There are only one or two things that I haven't seen them go through. One is bedrock, and another thing is they won't go through an amplifier. I mean, they will go through an amplifier, but they won't. I'll hit that in a second. So that by itself isn't terribly useful, because it just drills down and breaks the blocks, and it doesn't actually do anything with the blocks. It just kind of destroys them, or they gather in the bottom there if they're not directly in the beam. The beam will destroy entities, but only if it's directly touching them, and it doesn't fill up this entire block space. So that's not terribly useful. I mean, it is useful, and if you need to break a lot of blocks, you could set up an array of lasers and just tear things apart. But what you can do is you can add a tractor beam to it. So you add a tractor beam to it, and suddenly, as it digs, the stuff shows up in the tractor beam. It's got an internal inventory in it. Cool. What's even cooler is you grab yourself some logistical transporter here, and you put that right here and into this chest, and then you grab your configurator and set it to configure items. And what you do is you shift and then you right click the input to this thing, and it's now set on pull. So now you've got kind of a kind of early game miner thing going on. So you just turn that on and it'll slowly but surely dig down, usually until it hits bedrock or gets pretty close, and it's just gathering up all that stuff as it digs down through. Pretty cool, huh? So what else can you do with lasers? Well, let's first do a little bit of a... Let's hit the amplifier first. I almost forgot about this. So this is an amplifier. Now an amplifier can do a couple of things. It can change the direction of a laser. It can also gather multiple lasers and consolidate them into a beam. But it can also do a couple of other things. And the most important is the ability to add a delay. So if you want it to pulse, you could say put in a 10-tick delay. So now, every 10 ticks, it'll output what it's got in there up to a max of 2 giga RF. So now we've got one that's pulsing. It's getting a little bit loud, so I'm going to turn my music and sound down to, let's do 20% for now. Yeah, still kind of loud, but not bad. So that's neat. Let's just add 0, no delay. Another thing you can do is make it, say you want it to gather 10,000 RF before it fires. Enter that in there, and again, it'll only fire whenever it gathers 10,000 RF. Since these are both outputting 2,000 RF per tick, it pulses pretty quickly. I could scale that up to, let's say, 100,000. So 100k RF, so waits for it to gather 100k RF, then pulses all that energy out in a beam. Another thing you can do is set a max. So let's say you only want it to output 2,000 RF. It's got 4,000 coming in. We'll put this min down to 0. So now it's actually gathering energy while still producing a 2,000 RF beam, which is just one of these. The other is getting stored in the inventory, so that's pretty neat. Let's just turn this back up. Just add a lot of zeros. It maxes out at 2 giga RF, by the way. Now another thing you can do, which is also really cool, is it's got a redstone sensitivity down here in the right-hand corner. Right now I've got it disabled, but I can set it to high. Now when I set it to high, it'll just sit here gathering all kinds of energy until I decide to flip the switch, and then it'll just output that all and then eventually go down to just what's being input to it. So now I can turn it on and off with the switch. That actually comes in really handy and is very important a little bit later when I get over to the reactor. Another thing I can do is set it to pulse. Now this is pretty cool. So basically it'll just sit there gathering RF until it hits a redstone signal. When it gets that redstone signal, it'll just pulse out all its energy and then stop. Boom. So basically a one-shot laser. Some pretty cool applications of that, I think. It's basically to be used with a button. I just got my one lever here, so there's that. So that's cool. That's what the amplifier does. Really neat. You can, as I said, you can gather lots and lots of lasers into one amplifier, and it'll just, if you turn it off like this, it'll just sit there gathering energy until you're ready to fire it. Now you might be wondering, how far does one of these lasers shoot? Well, I set up a little cursor. It's actually configurable in the Mekanism config file, but the default, I'll just turn this guy on here, and grab this guy out because I'm going to need him shortly. Put that in there, and I won't need that for a while. The default, let's see if I can run here. The default is 64 blocks. Again, it's configurable, so you could make it shoot further if you wanted. But that's not entirely necessary, because if you really want to make it go farther, you can see how it just ends right here. I can just toss down an amplifier, and that'll extend it another 64 blocks. So it's very nice and modular that way. I don't know that I would change the 64 block maximum unless you wanted them to be really good at digging from like the top of a mountain all the way down to bedrock. So that's rather neat. So there, as you can see, the beam just ends right there, and this is 64 blocks away. I counted it out. So that's cool. So what else could you do with the lasers? Well, I sat and I thought about it and realized that lasers do quite a bit of damage. Luckily, I'm in creative mode, so I don't have to worry about them, but they will kill you pretty quick, especially a high-intensity laser. So what can I do with that? Well, I came over here and built myself a little mob killer. Ideally, you'd want something that actually spawns mobs inside, but the theory here is rather simple. I've got two lasers that shoot into amplifiers here, which redirect the beams upward to these two amplifiers, and these two amplifiers are aimed at these amplifiers over here. And both these amplifiers are just set to redstone high, which means they're off unless they get a redstone signal. And that's so that the beams that come out of here won't break whatever blocks here, because the beams, if you let them get powerful enough, can even break obsidian relatively quickly. So if I just turn this on, you'll see there's a little pulse. So what I did is I set both of these to wait for 200,000 KRF and then pulse. That's a lot of energy. So if we throw some mobs in there, like some iron golems, boom. A lot of power coming out of those beams. So that's something you could do with it, just a little impromptu mob killer. So get something to spawn mobs in there, like a vanilla cage or something, and all you really need to make a mob spawner is Mekanism, and then maybe something down below to gather up all the loot. The reason I put them up a block like this is it makes it far less likely that the beams will destroy the items that drop out of whatever you're killing. I noticed that when I put them at ground level, they would destroy probably about half the stuff that was dropping. This has a much lower chance of destroying stuff. Alright, so that's that. Oop, don't jump into the beam. I'm going to turn this guy off. I'm going to turn all these off as well. Oh, I'd actually turn them on. Never mind. Turn that off. Okay, so what else we got? Well, next up is our new multi-block super energy storage unit called the Energized Induction Matrix. These things hold a ton of power. Now these things are a multi-block structure made out of induction casing, which is the main outer shell of the unit. Induction ports, which it can have an arbitrary number of them as long as they aren't along a case edge. Basically, these are for importing and outporting energy into the unit. And then there are basic induction cells. Now, basic induction cells are made from these energy tablets surrounding a basic energy cube of the same level as the cell. And at the first level, you've got lithium dust, and I'll talk about lithium in a minute. So that's how you make your basic. And then every recipe above the basic is actually just the energy tablets in the corners, and then the step lower than the one you're trying to create, so in this case advanced, is one step lower than elite, and then a cube to match the induction cell that you're going to want to make. And each level is like that, so the ultimate would be 4 elites, and then energy tablets, and then an ultimate energy cube. Now the other thing that these need is induction providers. Each of these is basically control circuits of the same level as the provider you want to make, a cube of the same level as the provider you want to make, and then 4 lithium dust in the corners. And that's pretty much reflected in all of these. Again, ultimate induction provider, ultimate control circuits surrounding an ultimate energy cube with lithium dust in the corners. So once you get some of this stuff together, like say this, here's our induction casing, induction ports, ultimate induction cells, and ultimate energy providers. You now have something that's going to hold a lot of energy. So in this case, we're talking 204 giga RF per induction cell, and I've got 7 of them here. That is 1.4 tera RF. So what you do to make one of these, and again, these can be arbitrarily sized as long as you can put at least one induction cell and 1 induction provider into it. It's just a cuboid multi-block structure. And then you surround it all in induction casing. Oop. Like so. And then you need at least 2 induction ports, unless you only want to store energy, but one for going in and one for going out. Though typically you're probably going to want a couple in and a couple out, depending on what kind of cable you're hooking it up to. And then, oop, I need to put another one of these. And then once it's done, you'll see this little nice sparkly red effect, and then you know you're ready to go. So you can just pump energy in there. So let's just grab ourselves a creative energy cube. Boom. Oh, and I'm going to need some that beautiful universal cable. Boom. So you just put this guy down, let's say right there, and run some cable up here, and we'll see that we are gathering power. And there's a lot of room in this thing. Look at that. Just going and going and going. Now if we want to take power out, let's find something to power. Let's just take an empty an empty ultimate cube, energy cube. We'll just put him down over here. Now, this is the mistake that I made earlier, and I'm going to let you all learn by my mistake. You hook it up to here. Ooh. And nothing seems to happen. The missing piece is that you actually have to get your old pal, the configurator, out, set it to energy, and then shift right-click this guy back, and you'll see that this light here turns to red. That means it's outputting power. So now, if we click on this guy, I faced him the wrong way. I was like, it's not filling up. That's because you can't put it in the out. So then boom, that just fills up so fast. There's just so much energy available to it. And these cables, again, can produce 128 kilo RF per tick. These things are just beasts now. So yeah, that's the new energized induction matrix. So yeah, I expect those to become a big mainstay of any very mature base. I'm certainly going to be using them on Infinity Fortress. I'm going to tell you that right now. Holy moly, can these things hold power. Now let's talk about lithium dust. Now lithium dust is a new material that you get from our old pal, the salination plant. But it's now sporting the name solar evaporation tower. So you'll see solar evaporation towers are essentially exactly the same as the salination plant, just with a new name. And basically, the first step of making lithium is the same as starting your tier 3 chain, and that's creating brine. It's actually being pumped out into the one behind it, so you can see we're making brine here. Well, that brine then goes out through this tube to a second solar evaporator. Now these aren't very tall or big, so they're not producing a ton. And this evaporator is producing liquid lithium. So there you go, it takes brine in and converts it to lithium, just in the same way that this turns water into brine. So now you've got two towers going, and then you got lithium coming out this end here. Look at all that lithium. Delightful. Now that lithium goes into a rotary condensator set to decondensating. And what that does is it turns your liquid lithium to regular lithium, or gaseous lithium. Now from there, the story of lithium is not over, because it's got a couple of stops after this guy. You go through your pressurized tube here to your chemical crystallizer. Chemical crystallizer will take that lithium and crystallize it into lithium dust. I'll pull this out here. So as you can see, it's going to take that lithium gas, and it's going to start making dust. It's not a very fast process, but again, these can be upgraded with speed upgrades and energy upgrades. There you go. So boom, there we go. Making lithium dust. So that's how you get lithium for making all this top-end stuff. So now we've covered pretty much everything in the mod pack that's new to version 8, except this bad boy over here. This new guy is the reactor, and this is a power beast. So we're going to hit it real quick here and just take a look at it. So fully activated reactor will be doing this thing. Basically, it's taking two gases over here that I'll be talking about in a second, and doing a fusion reaction to produce just oodles and oodles of power. And this was touched on briefly in the video with TechnicPack and Aiden. But basically what's happening is you got a laser beam that's heating this chamber until it reaches 100,000 degrees Kelvin, at which point you can ignite a reaction. Now, I want to show you how to build this thing and how to turn it on, so I'm actually going to destroy this entire reactor, and we're going to start from scratch. So we're just going to blow this entire reactor away. Look at that. Oh, the reactor's gone. And I killed some dirt too, but that's fine. So I'm going to show you how to build this guy. Now, it is a multi-block structure, and I will... Oh. Well, that was Forgot to kill this guy first. That's okay, I can rebuild that. That's easy. All those unplanned little shenanigans. That's actually like the 3rd or 4th time I've done that. We'll just take these cables down too. And luckily I've still got all this stuff in my inventory. Look at that. So just a couple of ultimate induction cells right there. Right there. Induction casing and another induction port. Okay. So before we build our new reactor, we're going to take a look at the gases that we need. Now we need 2 gases. Well, 3, but 2 primarily. And those gases are deuterium and tritium. Now to make those gases, you need 2 separate chains. The first and easiest is using an electric pump and electrolytic separator with another new upgrade called the filter upgrade. Now if we walk over here, look at this guy and look at his upgrade, you'll see he's got the filter upgrade in him. Now what that does is it converts his output from normal water, and it doesn't look like you're going to be able to see, but if we come over here we should be able to see it. Converts normal water collection into heavy water. So that's a new thing. You pump that heavy water into this electrolytic separator and it turns it into deuterium and actually oxygen, but it's dumping the oxygen right now because I didn't have anything to use it on. So then when I've taken that deuterium out to this gas tank over here, and then it's going over here, which I'll touch on in a second because that's our 3rd gas in here. Now for tritium, what you do is you take some of that lithium gas that you're making over here. So once you've got enough of that lithium dust together, you take off your chemical crystallizer and then instead hook it up to these new things called the solar neutron activator. Now solar neutron activator is actually not that expensive to build, but it does require something rather specific, and that is HDPE sheet, which means that you have to do the HDPE chain or the plastic chain, which is quite involved, requires several steps, but since it's old mechanism I won't go over it here. But that in and of itself is a fairly advanced mechanism right there. So this is a very advanced machine. Everything else is pretty common: reinforced alloy, elite control circuits, steel casing, and bronze ingots. So once you have the plastic up and running, it's not actually that hard to make these, which is good because you're going to need a lot of them. Specifically, these things don't produce lithium all that fast. It used to be a lot worse, but luckily I had noticed that there was a great disparity between the solar neutron activator, or SNA, and the deuterium production. So I asked them to boost it up a little, and Mr. Brady increased it by a factor of 4, which brings it much closer to kind of a world of reasonability here. So you can see it's ticking up there, but from base calculations, you'll need about 2 or 3 of these per. You'll need 2 or 3 of these producing tritium for every 1 electrolytic separator, or sorry, 1 electric pump making heavy water. So again, you're looking at about a 3 to 1. It's actually closer to 2.5 to 1 conversion. The other problem is that these are also only active during the day, so putting them in a desert or something where there's not going to be a lot of rain is going to maximize your output. Or if you've got lots of mods installed and have a dimension where it's always day, definitely a better place to put them. The more daylight you can gather, the less of these you'll need. So yeah, that's your chain to make these 2 new fusion materials. But you're going to need something else before you go any further than that. And I didn't put it in there. It's in... Shoot. It's this guy, the holorom. So once you got both those gases, you also need to grab yourself a chemical infuser and then combine the 2 gases. So you do that just by pumping them in the sides, and you get DT fuel, which is deuterium tritium fuel. And what you do is you put a holorom inside in order to charge it up. This will come in handy when we've got our reactor built. So now we've got all the gases set up. Well, basically, the reactor, as you saw, it took 2 gases in order to produce a reaction. And one of those gases is tritium, which again, you're going to have to be very careful about balancing that with the deuterium gas that will also be produced in much higher quantity, especially since 1 pump is actually not enough to keep 1 electrolytic separator without any upgrades fed. So if you have an electrolytic separator that you've upgraded to max speed and max energy, likely you're going to be able to put a vast number of pumps into that 1 separator. And if you've got additional mods, it's not going to help you any, because again, you need that filter. You need that filter to make heavy water, so you can't get away from the electric pump. Yeah, tricky, huh? So you got to use the electric pump. Yep, no crutching on extra utilities this time. So, again, you keep your gases balanced. So then we get to the point where we actually need to build a reactor. Before you build a reactor, the first thing you need to do is make a laser array. It doesn't necessarily have to be this big, and this is where I got to turn my sound down, because these things get pretty loud when you got this many of them. So I'm just going to turn sound completely off for the time being. So basically you need to create a laser array. And what this is it's, I think that's 10 lasers, it's 20 lasers, all pointed into amplifiers that are then aimed down the line to this amplifier. So amplifiers feeding into amplifiers, so it's gathering every single bit of energy that's being outputted to these lasers into this amplifier here. And it's been just gathering up all that energy. As you can see, it's stored max. Luckily, it doesn't break or explode or anything when it hits max. It just wastes any extra energy you pump in. Now, this is the part that was not obvious to me that I had to think about for a little while. And it's very specific that you need to do this, where you've got one laser amplifier that everything's channeled into, that fills up to max and is turned off with a redstone signal. It's very important. If you don't do this, the reactor will only ever heat up to just slightly cooler than the combined energy of all your lasers. So with 20 lasers, it would heat up to about 19,000 Kelvin, about 19,000 and a half Kelvin. So it's nowhere near the 100,000 Kelvin you need to start the reaction. So let's just start building this reactor. Now the reactor is built in a very, didn't grab my show and tell stuff. The reactor is built in a very specific way. I've experimented around with this multi-block, and it is indeed, I'll keep that universal cable, I needed a pressurized tube. I don't have any in there, so pressurized tube. Grab some, where is it? Pressurized tube there. I'm going to need some of that. I've tried various other configurations of the reactor controller, reactor glass, reactor port, and a laser focal matrix, and I'll hit all the recipes for this right now. I'm also going to need this tank and that tank. Good. Okay, so the reactor starts with the reactor frame. That's your basic block. That's your generic, like, any frame block, and that's not too bad. It's an atomic alloy surrounded by steel casing. Pretty pretty expensive, but by the time you're ready to build one of these things, you're not going to have any problems affording that. Oop, sorry. I think you get 4 per that, so it's not that bad. You also need at least one reactor controller, which this is pretty expensive. It's 5 reactor frames, a gas tank, a glass pane, and 2 of those ultimate control circuits. So that's your reactor controller. You need 1 of them. You're also going to need a few of these reactor ports, which is an ultimate control circuit surrounded by reactor frame. And I don't think you get 2 of them. I think you might get 4. Let's just check that real quick. Oh no, you do get 2. I did that right. Cool. And the last thing you'll need, the second to last thing you'll need is reactor glass, which I don't know how much of this is actually needed. I based my design entirely off of the one that I saw in that teaser video. And again, I tried to scale it up, I tried to make it square, and nothing really works. So it's got to be like in that video, and I'll be showing that in a second. But anyway, reactor glass, which, again, you get 4 for everyone, and it's just glass surrounded by reactor frame. And then we go over here to the second reactor. The last thing you really need is the laser focal matrix, and that's just reactor glass surrounding a block of redstone. So again, very expensive as far as steel and atomic alloy, which is your diamond, and I think it's called impregnated or energized obsidian, which itself takes diamond. So there's a lot of expense here. But again, by the time you're ready to make one of these, you've got all this. So anyway, so you need one laser focal matrix, and then you're going to need to make a holorom. And a holorom is simply 4 gold dust dumped into an enrichment chamber, and that'll make 1 holorom. And then again down here you see you need lasers and laser amplifiers, which is that setup over there. So now we're ready to build our reactor. So your reactor is a 5x5, I'm not sure what to call this, pseudo star maybe. So it's like that and like that. So that's the base. And on each side, I'm just going to fly here, each side is 5 tall, so it's 2, 3, 4, 5. 2, 3, 4, 5. And I'm going to replace some of this with glass, so I'll be knocking it out. This is just a quick way to do it. And then again, the same kind of pseudo star, just standing up this time instead of on the ground. As far as I can tell, you have to leave the outer casing intact, but you can take out that one, that one, that one, that one, and that one, and replace it with reactor glass. So that's valid there, which I'm going to do a little bit here. This side is the little side that goes over to here, so I need to make sure I didn't line that up very well, did I? Bummer. Okay, well, that's not a big problem. Oh. Alright, so then that's done, so now we can knock some of these out. So in the front here, I'm sorry that it's so silent, but those lasers are really loud and they're right behind me. So on this side, we're going to need mostly glass. And this can probably all be reactor frame, but this is, again, exactly the way that they built it. And I haven't varied too much from this because it looks so good. And so, anyway, glass surrounding one of these laser focal matrix. The idea is that this laser here needs to hit that guy there. So I think I got that lined up perfectly. Good. So this actually should be lined up okay. So it should actually be that guy, and that guy. And these two, oh, those are the wrong blocks. These two I'm going to make reactor glass. I think they can be reactor casing. Again, I think reactor casing and reactor glass are interchangeable. I just haven't done it much as far as trying to make them interchangeable. I think that's lined up. Yeah, that's good. So those will be our output ports. And then in the front here, we have 2 more of these reactor ports. And just put glass up the middle. This will be where our gas goes in, and this will be where our power comes out. Now the top is going to be more reactor frame. Boom. Boom, 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 boom. Boom, boom, boom. And then in the center, and it's got to be exactly in this spot, I've tried putting the reactor, it goes to the reactor controller. I've tried putting it everywhere else around this block, in the sides, in the center of the front face, and it's got to be this block. And then once you get it there, boom, you see your little sparkly reds, and you know you've done it right. So then we get some pressurized tubing out here. Bring that down, and we'll just bring that out a little bit, and then that's where now we put down our gases. And one side's got to be deuterium, and one side's got to be tritium. I don't think it actually matters which is which. I've got to make sure that the right side's facing forward. So we'll just do 2 tanks of tritium and 2 tanks of deuterium. So we got blue going in and red going in. Tritium and deuterium. We'll get our universal cable going out to our induction matrix over here. As you can see, this I had this hooked up a little while, so there it goes. So it's already got some energy in it, a lot of it. 67 giga RF is already in it. Okay, now at this point we're almost ready to go. The thing that you got to do now that it's all set up and ready to output power, you got fuel coming in, you got power coming out. We are ready to start her up. Oh, and I actually got to use something that's not going to stack on it. So we've got these 3 tabs over here. You've got heat, you've got fuel, and you've got statistics. You've also got your storing and producing numbers down here, which is kind of helpful, actually. Heat basically tells you what current temperature your plasma and what current temperature your case is. Thus far, as I know, they do not have catastrophic failures in here, so these numbers aren't totally meaningful. They do mean stuff, but they don't kind of indicate failure yet. They were saying that they're going to eventually implement failure, so be on the lookout for that. Here we've got our fuel. Now we've got deuterium and tritium going into the DT fuel combiner. This actually then gets burned up in the reactor, so you'll never see this go above 0. But the important thing here is if you look above the DT fuel tank, you'll see an injection rate set to 0. If you go down to this little black box and click in it, you'll get a little cursor. You can set your injection rate. To start, I'm going to set my injection rate as 4. So I hit enter, and you can see injection rate changes to 4. Now statistics, this is a little bit of a confusing window. It took me a little bit to even get kind of the hold of it. But basically you've got your air-cooled setup at the top and your water-cooled setup down below. It tells you what your minimum injection rate to maintain reaction is on each of them. So water-cooled, you have to keep a much higher injection rate. The water-cooled is actually for steam production, and since there aren't any native steam-using machines or power generators in Mekanism yet, that's going to be largely unused unless you're pumping that steam out to another mod. There is a steam production generator in at least the plans. I think it's for V9, so it'll be a little bit before we see that, but hopefully not too long. So mainly we're going to be concentrating on the air-cooled reaction. You can see minimum injection rate to the ignition temp in both cases, but specifically in the air-cooled is 100 megakelvin. That's the important number. And then you have your max plasma temp of 300 megakelvin and your max casing temp of 200 megakelvin, which I'm sure those will become more important when catastrophic failure is put in. I've actually not experienced any problems going over those as of yet. So let's look at our heat. We've got 300 kilokelvin, or no, it's actually just 300 Kelvin. So we've got to go to roughly, what would that be? That'd be a lot more times that, so more than like 500 times that, something like that. And casing is also 300 Kelvin, so we need to pump a lot of energy into it. Now, as I said, the thing that I first did is I just set up a laser array like this and just had it pumping straight in here. 20 lasers, heated this thing up to 20 megakelvin, and there it's just shy of 20 megakelvin, and there it's at. So what you got to do is you got to smack this thing with a lot of energy. Oh, before I smack this thing, we got to put the hologram. So when you first open the reactor control, you've got this little box. You can see it lighting up as I mouse over it. Unfortunately, my mouse cursor isn't visible, and I just realized that. I'm sorry if I've tried to point at anything with my mouse. But anyway, you pick up your hologram and you put it in there. That primes the system to start a reaction as soon as it gets up to heat. And the only way to get this thing up to heat, as I said, is to smack it with a lot of energy. What's a lot of energy? Well, we've got 200 giga RF in this amplifier ready to go. So if I throw it, assuming that I've aimed this right, as soon as I throw this lever, boom, and the reaction starts. So now, we come up here, we can see we are producing just a little over 600 KRF, and we're cooling down because, again, all that energy just being smacked into the system all at once heats it up to way above where it needs to in order to initiate the reaction. But now that the laser has come down a bit, and I assume this is what 20 times 2, so this is 40,000. It's a beam of about oh, that's because I got redstone there. It's a beam of about I think be 40,000 40,000 kilo RF. So that's what's going in there. That's not actually probably contributing too much to it. At this point, I can actually shut this beam off, and the reaction will run mostly just on the fuel. Running the beam in there will increase the temperature a little bit, but probably not enough to matter. So then we're still coming down in temperature, but you can see if we go into the fuel that the deuterium and the tritium have gone down a little bit, and DT fuel is being burned as fast as it's being created. Now if we go down here, we can see that our fuels are indeed being burned at a pretty good rate. I'm assuming that rate is 4 millibuckets per tick. I'm assuming that's what that's the units of the injection rate. I don't think there's actually any units on the injection rate now. It's just 4. I think 10 is as high as it goes. I think that's what I discovered. Oh no, I can go up to 20. I know I can't go like to 100. So I wonder, can I go 50? Oh my goodness, that's probably going to be draining. Good lord, yeah. Probably don't ever want to go with that. How much power are we reproducing? Oh my goodness. Oh, look at that. Yeah, we are way over maximum. Look at that. Oh, I think this is telling us where I think I just figured out that these max temps, maybe that's where the system is going to stabilize. Yeah, I'm not sure. But it doesn't really seem to make any sense, and maybe they'll change the wording on that because it's not very intuitive. But man, are we just producing juice like crazy. Look at that. We're filling up. And those cables aren't even going to come close to being able to handle that power. I've got three ultimate universal cables, so 3 times 128 is just shy of 400,000 RF per tick, and we are producing 2.7 mega RF per tick and still going up. Let's turn that injection rate back down to 4. Wow, that is crazy. Well, that was a neat experiment. I never turned one up that high. I thought it stopped at 10 when I tried to type in 100, but I'm assuming we can probably go up to 99. Good thing these don't explode yet. Holy cow. Alright, so now this guy, meanwhile, has already absorbed 70 giga RF. Well, there was some in there already, so a lot of that energy that I just tried to produce is gone completely to waste because there's no way it could output it that fast. But if you had, say, one of those cryothium-filled conduits between here and there, you could just be filling this energized induction matrix up with power pretty much as fast as you could produce it. And that's just awesome. So again, the only real limitation to these reactors as far as power, it seems, as far as, I mean, there's just, who's going to be using, you know, that much power, is really going to be your gas production, because deuterium is relatively fast, especially since the setup is relatively simple. But your real limiting factor is going to be this guy here, your solar neutron activator, and as an extension, really, your ability to produce lithium. Lithium produces, as we saw, very slowly. As you can see, we are not producing very fast, and this is on a, I mean, it's only at 8x multiplier, or 0.8x multiplier, which is because we're in just a standard biome. But even so, we're not making a lot of lithium. So this is going to be your limiting factor. It's going to be your lithium, and by extension your tritium, which is, again, counting up pretty slowly compared to what we can do with deuterium. So at the end of the day, sure, you can try to get up to an injection rate of 50, but the amount of infrastructure you're going to need to make in order to get it that high is, yeah, you're going to be more likely to just kind of maybe pulse this thing at extremely high temperatures like that, and then just produce all that energy as it cools its way down. So yeah, we're coming down back to that area, which I think an injection of 4 was, what was it? It's in statistics, 400k RF. So for every 1 injection, you get 100k RF per tick. So that's good. Well, actually, I think you get a little more, but something like that. Again, I haven't really looked at all the numbers on these. I wanted to kind of get this video out and show how it's made so that everyone can kind of get out there experimenting with these and kind of running the numbers and start working on efficiency and stuff. So this is very kind of cursory overview of what they can do. So I'm not really sure what passive generation means versus this number down here. I think that they'll equalize it the same, but I'm not 100% sure. But so yeah, that's Mekanism version 8. A lot of cool new stuff, a lot of stuff to play with, a lot of very end-game stuff to play with. Lasers, I mean, come on, lasers. And I think there are going to be a couple of more features that are even still being planned for later in version 8, so I may come back and show you those. But I think for now I'm just going to call that a wrap. Thanks for watching my video. I hope you found this informative, and I hope that you get out there and have a lot of fun with version 8.